Typically a doomsday plan. It is meant to help you survive the thing that happens after doomsday. During the Cold War, the U.S. had a doomsday plan meant to protect the president and ensure the continued functioning of the U.S. government in the event of a nuclear attack. So, nuclear attack, your doomsday, happens. Then you've got your doomsday plan to try and survive it. In 2005, Congress passed another doomsday plan. It was meant to ensure the House could function in the aftermath of a terrorist attack that killed or incapacitated most of its members. The rule they passed in the House states that under, quote, catastrophic circumstances, a quorum would not require 218 congressmen as it does now. Rather, the House could just operate with whoever happened to be around. So again, you have a terrorist attack, your doomsday scenario, and then there's this plan to help you survive it. That is what a doomsday plan usually is. This week, Washington is really into another so-called doomsday plan, but it's a weird kind of doomsday plan. It's not a plan meant to save the country in the event of doomsday. It is a plan meant to create a doomsday scenario in the event that Republicans have to compromise on tax rates. On Monday, ABC's Jonathan Karl explained how it worked. He said, Republicans are seriously considering a doomsday plan if fiscal cliff talks collapse entirely. It would be quite simple. House Republicans would allow a vote on extending the Bush middle-class tax cuts. That bill already passed in August in the Senate, and offer the president nothing more. No extension of the debt ceiling, nothing on unemployment, nothing on loopholes. Congress would recess for the holidays, and the president would face a big battle early in the year over the debt ceiling. Two senior Republican elected officials tell me this doomsday plan is becoming the most likely scenario. The New York Times a few days later added more detail, including this amazing quote from Rep. Michael C. Burgess of Texas. There's always better ground, but you have to get there. In this case, the better ground is exchanging the threat of a congressionally induced recession for the threat of a congressionally induced global financial crisis combined with recession. That is your better ground. That's a big plan. It's not better ground for the economy. And frankly, I find it difficult to see how it's better political ground even for the GOP. I figured I didn't get it, so I figured this was just beyond my small political brain to understand. And so I asked some of my smarter Hill Republican friends what the theory was here. They told me the idea is that while the president can permit the economy to fall over the fiscal cliff or curve or whatever you want to call it, he can't allow us to default on our debt. That would destroy the economy. That gives Republicans a stronger hand, or so they think. But really think about that. Here's how it would go. Later this month, Republicans would, by voting present, which everyone would think was a bit weird, permit the Bush tax cuts to expire for income over $250,000. That would let President Obama pocket $1 trillion in tax revenue and secure a win on his key priority in the talks. But they would do nothing else. At the end of the year, we would still go over the fiscal cliff. Remember, the Bush tax cuts, they're one of the least stimulative policies in the negotiations. According to the Economic Policy Institute, extending the middle-class tax cuts would wipe out only about 11% of the austerity's economic impact. 11%. But all that other stuff, the payroll tax cut, the unemployment insurance, the sequester, all that would still be expiring. So come early next year, the economy would likely be entering an austerity-induced recession. Markets would be convulsing as they realize that our austerity crisis is about to become also a default crisis. And so the economy as a whole is going to be going nuts. Poll after poll already shows Republicans are receiving more blame for the potential failure of the debt talks. And after telling the press that they're going to make a strategic decision to use a debt ceiling as more and more dangerous leverage, they're likely going to get blamed for that too. And that'll be much worse in the polls. Republicans may believe the White House would be so afraid of default that it would simply capitulate, but my reporting actually suggests the opposite. The White House is completely, inalterably committed to the idea that they need to break the GOP's habit of using the debt ceiling as a bargaining chip.
If Congress in any way suggests that they're going to tie negotiations to debt ceiling votes and take us to the brink of default once again, as part of a budget negotiation, which, by the way, we have never done in our history until we did it last year, I will not play that game because we've got to break that habit before it starts.
Did you see that background behind President Obama? It kept saying business roundtable. The business community agrees with him. My colleague at the Washington Post, Greg Sargent, reports the Business Roundtable, one of the biggest and most powerful business trade groups, is preparing to come out for the White House's proposal to give the president essentially unilateral authority to raise the debt ceiling forevermore, ending these crises forever. And so Republicans will have to compromise with a president who will already have pocketed $1 trillion in tax increases. Business will be screaming at them. The economy will be convulsing. They'll be getting blamed. That is supposed to put him in the weaker bargaining position. It's frankly hard for me to see how this strategy gets the GOP any of what it wants, either in terms of policy or politics. This doomsday they are courting, it might be their own. Joining us now is Chrystia Freeland, editor for Thomson Reuters Digital and author of The Plutocrats, How the Rich Are Getting Ahead and the Economy is Failing Everyone Else. I think I just messed up your subtitle. I apologize.
That's okay. You have the cover of the book there.
Did.
I love you.
It is a great book. I've read it. People should read it. I highly recommend it. But what I want to talk to you about tonight, because you've been talking to a lot of these business folks and you're reporting for the book and your everyday reporting, is the business community radicalizing on the debt ceiling? It seemed they didn't take that seriously in 2011, but from what I'm hearing, they're taking it a lot more seriously in 2012.
I think that's exactly right. And I think that it's because of the experience of what happened. You know, and two parts of the experience. First of all, I don't think that people believed America would get so close to the brink. Mm-hmm. You know, and you and I both heard, right? Remember at the time everyone kept on saying, oh, they'll do a deal, they'll do a deal, they'll do a deal. And the way they behaved was frankly astonishing. And the other thing that was actually a surprise, not just for American business, but for global business, was how powerful the reaction was. And I think actually the greatest reaction was outside the United States. This was the first time that the rest of the world really actually paid attention to the finer points of politics inside the Beltway, which actually are profoundly boring for the rest of the world in general. But this was really the moment in which, you know, in places like Beijing and Berlin, people started to say, you know what? Maybe American political dysfunction is so extreme as to imperil the macro stability of the country.
And so does this now actually lead to pressure? I mean, one complaint that the White House certainly had in 2011 was they talked to these business guys, and the business guys all said, yeah, this would be a disaster, but they didn't do anything about it, in part because they didn't really believe in it. So the Business Roundtable coming out for the White House's proposal here seems like a very big deal to me. I mean, are you seeing the beginnings of an actual campaign to pressure Republicans to take this threat off the table, to not get to the point where we begin seeing consumer confidence drop, begin seeing businesses cut back, begin feeling those economic effects that we got in 2011?
Well, I agree with you that this is an important moment, but I think we also have to remember that that hostility that we felt during the election campaign towards Obama, that wasn't fake.
Right.
That was really real. And in a way, you know, the fact that the president won in the teeth of opposition from the super rich, and the fact that he is now more insistent than ever on raising the taxes on the very top, does not exactly endear him to the entire business community. So I wouldn't say that battle is won, but I do think that what you're starting to hear from business is a sense that maybe Republicans actually are not better stewards of the economy as a whole. And that's scary.
Is there any evident effect being felt from the president's ongoing CEO tour? Since the election, despite the hostility, despite the feeling of somewhat betrayal on the part of the White House, he's been going to business group after business group, having business leaders over to the White House. Is that paying any dividends, or people sort of, is there any calming of those passions because of that diplomacy tour?
Sure. I think it really matters. And, you know, business people, believe it or not, are human beings too, and they like to be paid attention to. They especially like to be paid attention to by the president. So, yeah, I think it makes a big difference. And I do actually think the president is partly to blame for that extreme hostility in his first term, because he didn't do some of the basic, you know, meet and greet stuff that actually is the job of a political leader. He's making up a little bit for that now.
Do you think the White House can stand its ground on this? If we get past the fiscal cliff and Republicans are attempting to take this to the brink, do you think, despite what President Obama says, that they have the capacity to just say, listen, if you want to pull the pin on the grenade, you do it, but we are not going to do this anymore?
On the fiscal cliff or on the debt ceiling?
On the debt ceiling.
You know, I was very interested by your reporting, that you took a really strong position there. And I do think that the White House has been transformed, both by the experience with the debt ceiling and with the election. I think if they want to stand their ground, I think they can actually do it. I think that that is, in fact, possible. Can they? You know, we'll see. They seem a lot tougher now than they were last time around, don't you think?
They sound very tough now. Chrystia Freeland, editor of Thomson Reuters Digital and author of The Plutocrats. Thank you very much for being here tonight.
Pleasure, as ever.
I promised you Red Lobster, Olive Garden, and a timely political context for both, and I will deliver. That is ahead.